people are often used to the bury my heart at Wounded Knee narrative of Native Americans, which is as victims. But the narrative that I told was a narrative of power dominance, which came with brutality.
History, they say, is written by the victors. For centuries, we've heard tales of discovery and progress that glorify European expansion across North America. But there's another narrative that's been systematically silenced, the warnings from indigenous peoples who saw the catastrophe unfolding before them. Native Americans weren't passive observers to their own destruction. They were prophetic voices who understood precisely what was happening as foreign ships appeared on their shores. Their leaders spoke with clarity and foresight about the consequences of European contact, predictions that would prove devastatingly accurate. What might our shared history look like if we'd listened to these warnings? Let's journey through the forgotten prophecies that fell on deaf ears.
That's not what we associate Native Americans with. We associate us with taking the Native Americans' land and them fighting back, and that's when things get ugly.
The moment European ships appeared on the horizon, many Native Americans sensed a profound shift in their world's balance. These weren't just newcomers, they represented an existential threat that many tribal leaders immediately recognized. When Columbus landed in 1492, the Taino people of the Caribbean initially welcomed the strange visitors with generosity. However, Taino cacique Chief Hutway quickly recognized the Europeans' true intentions. After witnessing the Spaniards' brutality in Hispaniola, Hutway fled to Cuba to warn other communities, declaring, "These are not men, but people without hearts. They come not for trade, but for gold and to make us slaves." Hathaway organized resistance until he was captured and burned at the stake, becoming one of the first to both warn of and experience European cruelty. Further north, as the Pilgrims established Plymouth Colony in 1620, Wampanoag leaders debated how to respond. While Sachem Massasoit chose strategic alliance, other tribal elders expressed skepticism. One Wampanoag elder reportedly cautioned, "These strangers bring objects of wonder, but they look at our land with hungry eyes. Their appetite will never be satisfied." Perhaps most famous was the warning of Chief Powhatan to his brother Hopachankano regarding the Jamestown settlers. "These people from the rising sun cannot be trusted. They will take a little, then a little more, until all is gone." This prescient warning came years before Hopachankano would lead unsuccessful uprisings against the Virginia colonists in 1622 and 1644. Disease as the invisible killer. The most devastating weapon in the European arsenal wasn't steel or gunpowder, it was microscopic. Long before scientists understood germ theory, many Native Americans recognized that contact with Europeans brought deadly sickness. This invisible invasion would ultimately claim far more lives than any battlefield conflict. When smallpox swept through native communities in the early 1600s, tribal healers and spiritual leaders witnessed horrors beyond comprehension. Entire villages were decimated within weeks, with mortality rates reaching 90% in some areas. The Wampanoag, who had initially helped the Plymouth colonists survive, saw their population plummet from approximately 12,000 to barely 1,000 within 3 years of sustained contact. Tisquantum Squanto, who had been kidnapped and taken to Europe before returning, observed the connection between ships' arrivals and subsequent outbreaks. According to colonial accounts, he warned neighboring tribes, "The strangers bring invisible spirits that enter the body and burn it from within. Keep distance when their great boats arrive, or your people will perish." In the Pacific Northwest, tribal oral histories record how coastal communities established protocols after noticing patterns of illness. Makah leaders ordered the villages to relocate inland temporarily when European trading vessels appeared. One elder's warning was preserved. "Their breath carries death even when their intentions seem peaceful. Trade only in open air and burn what they touch." The Haudenosaunee Iroquois developed sophisticated quarantine practices after observing disease transmission. Their healers warned the sickness moves from person to person like fire through dry grass. Separate the sick and burn their belongings, or all will be consumed. Perhaps most tragic were the spiritual interpretations of these epidemics. Some native leaders saw the diseases as evidence that the Europeans possessed dangerous spiritual power. A Lakota holy man reportedly interpreted the epidemics as punishment. "The strangers have broken natural law, and their sickness is the earth's response. We must avoid their ways or suffer the same fate." Broken promises and treaties. As European settlements expanded, diplomatic relationships replaced initial contacts. Treaties became the primary mechanism for managing the relationship between native nations and colonial powers. Yet, indigenous leaders repeatedly warned their people that these paper agreements held little meaning to the newcomers. When the Delaware Lenape leader Tidusgung negotiated with Pennsylvania colonial authorities in the 1750s, he famously stated, "The white man's promises last only until he needs more land." After being displaced multiple times despite previous guarantees, Tidusgung warned his council that the colonist concept of permanent boundaries was fundamentally different from their own. Chief Red Jacket of the Seneca delivered a powerful warning after yet another treaty negotiation in 1792. "Brother, our seats were once large and yours were small. You have now become a great people, and we have scarcely a place left to spread our blankets. When you first asked for land, you promised to protect us. Now you claim sovereignty over the land, and we over ourselves." The pattern became devastatingly clear. The Shawnee leader, Tecumseh, traveled extensively among tribes in the early 1800s, warning, "The white men make marks on paper, and they claim these marks give them our lands. When those marks no longer serve them, they make new marks. No tribe should sign away land without the consent of all tribes, for the land belongs to all." After witnessing numerous treaty violations, Sauk leader Black Hawk cautioned his people how smooth must be the language of the whites when they can make right look like wrong and wrong like right. This insight about linguistic manipulation revealed how Native leaders understood not just the legal deception, but the cultural mechanisms that enabled it. Perhaps the most profound warning came from Cherokee Chief John Ross during the removal crisis of the 1830s. Despite having won their case before the Supreme Court, Ross told his people, "They speak of justice, but their hearts are set on our lands. Their laws protect them, not us." The subsequent Trail of Tears proved his assessment tragically accurate. The prophecies of tribal elders. Throughout Native American societies, certain individuals were recognized for their spiritual insights and prophetic abilities. As European colonization intensified, many of these seers and holy people experienced visions forecasting the changes that would transform indigenous life. Around 1790, the Seneca prophet Handsome Lake experienced a series of revelations during a severe illness. He warned, "I have seen our people abandoning the old ways, taking up the stranger's water that burns the spirit, and falling into destruction. Unless we maintain our ceremonies while adapting to new realities, we will vanish from the earth." His Gaiweo, good message, became a revitalization movement that helped the Seneca navigate cultural transition while maintaining their identity. The Delaware prophet Neolin emerged in the 1760s with warnings about cultural contamination. "The Master of Life has shown me that we must return to our original ways," he proclaimed. "The stranger's tools, drinks, and religions poison our connection to the land. Their very presence makes the game animals flee." Neolin's teachings influenced Pontiac's rebellion and represented an early recognition that cultural dependence on European goods threatened indigenous sovereignty. In the Pacific Northwest, multiple prophets among the Salish peoples predicted dramatic changes. One Spokane spiritual leader reportedly declared, "I have seen a future where great iron horses cross our hunting grounds, where the rivers are blocked, and where our children forget our language. This will come unless we maintain the sacred covenant with the land." The most famous prophetic warning came from the Shawnee spiritual leader Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet. Around 1805, he experienced a vision during which he apparently died before being revived. Upon his return, he warned, "The Americans spread like oil on water, covering all in their path. They bring the poison that makes men forget their ancestors, their children, and their sacred duties. Return to the ways before the strangers came, or our people will disappear like morning mist." Among the Lakota, a holy man named Bull Shows His Face prophesied in the early 1800s, "I have seen our children taken to faraway places where they are taught to despise their parents' ways. I have seen our sacred mountains torn open for the yellow metal. I have seen the buffalo vanish and our people confined to small islands in a sea of strangers." Resistance leaders in their messages. As colonization intensified, numerous native leaders emerged who combined political acumen with military resistance. Their warnings weren't just spiritual or philosophical, they were urgent calls to action based on clear-eyed assessments of the existential threat. Metacom, known to the English as King Philip, united Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and other New England tribes in 1675 after observing decades of encroachment. Before launching his war, he warned allied sachems, "If we submit now, we will soon have to beg permission to fish in our own waters and hunt in our own forests. Better to die free than live as servants in the land of our fathers." His analysis of incremental loss of sovereignty proved accurate, even though his rebellion ultimately failed. Tecumseh's resistance movement in the early 1800s was perhaps the most sophisticated political response to American expansion. His warning to assembled tribal leaders was both strategic and prophetic. The Americans intend to have our whole country. They will not be satisfied until they get it all. They want the land not to live on, but to grow wealthy by selling it to others. His attempt to create a pan-Indian confederacy recognized that individual tribal resistance was futile against the united American state. In the southwest Cochise of the Chiricahua Apache initially attempted peaceful relations with American settlers until betrayal forced him into resistance. His warning to his people revealed deep insight into colonial psychology. They make war because they are afraid. Their fear makes them see enemies where none exist, and their greed makes them take what they do not need. Sitting Bull, the Hunkpapa Lakota leader who defeated Custer at Little Bighorn, understood the futility of military resistance in the long term despite short-term victories. He reportedly told his warriors, "They may kill me, but they cannot kill my words. We may defeat their soldiers today, but they will send more tomorrow and the next day. They multiply like grasshoppers in summer." Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, after his epic fighting retreat toward Canada in 1877, articulated perhaps the most heartbreaking warning about the ultimate futility of armed resistance. "Our young men are fierce, but the Americans are many. Fighting them is like fighting the wind. They come from all directions, and when we strike them, we hit nothing." His famous surrender speech, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever," acknowledged what many resistance leaders eventually realized: military solutions alone could not prevent colonization. Cultural genocide beyond physical destruction. While the physical violence of colonization was devastating, many native leaders warned that the assault on indigenous cultures represented an even deeper existential threat. They recognized that survival meant more than just physical presence. It required maintaining spiritual connections, languages, and social structures. In the late 1800s, as the U.S. government implemented boarding school policies, Lakota holy man Black Elk warned, "They have taken our children to make them forget who they are. A people who cannot speak their language or remember their ancestors' ways soon cease to be a people at all." His recognition that cultural erasure could accomplish what military force couldn't proved tragically accurate, as thousands of native children were forcibly removed from their communities. When missionaries intensified efforts to convert native communities, many spiritual leaders pushed back. A Pueblo religious leader reportedly cautioned his community, "These black robes bring a powerful medicine, but remember that our ceremonies connect us to this specific land and these specific ancestors. Their God may be strong, but he does not know our mountains and rivers. If we abandon our ways, we cut the cord that has sustained our people since the beginning." As reservations were established and traditional subsistence patterns disrupted, Paiute leader Sarah Winnemucca observed, "They take away our hunting grounds, then mock us for not becoming farmers overnight. They destroy our social structures, then criticize us for falling into despair. This is a deeper conquest than taking land. They seek to remake us in their image." The Anishinaabe leader Edward Benton Benai warned his people about the psychological dimensions of cultural genocide. "When they convince you to be ashamed of your ancestors, they have conquered your spirit. When you believe their stories about yourself rather than the stories of your grandmothers, they no longer need soldiers to control you." During the allotment era, when tribal lands were divided into individual parcels, Muskogee Creek leader Chito Hajo warned, "Our strength comes from our communal traditions. When they make us into individual landowners, they separate us from each other and from our traditions of shared responsibility. This policy aims to dissolve us as a people even while some individuals might prosper." Perhaps most profound was Hopi religious leader Yukiuma's warning when anthropologists began extensively documenting native ceremonies. They study our ways as if we are already gone. They record our songs and write our stories in books because they believe we are vanishing, but by treating us as museum pieces rather than living traditions, they help create the very disappearance they claim to regret. Land, the central conflict. At the heart of nearly every conflict between Native Americans and European settlers lay fundamentally different conceptions of land, not just who owned it, but what ownership even meant. Indigenous leaders consistently warned their people that this philosophical gulf would make meaningful compromise nearly impossible. During treaty negotiations in 1854, Chief Seattle, south of the Duwamish and Suquamish, delivered what may be the most profound articulation of this difference. How can one buy or sell the air, the warmth of the land, if we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water? How can you buy them? Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. While the exact wording of his speech remains debated, the core warning was clear. The commodification of land represented not just economic loss, but spiritual catastrophe. In the Black Hills, Pahasapa to the Lakota, Crazy Horse warned, they make promises about boundaries, but their hunger for the yellow metal knows no bounds. They will come into our sacred places because they do not see or feel what makes these places sacred. His prediction proved accurate when gold was discovered in the Black Hills in 1874, leading to immediate violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie. As the Dawes Act divided communal tribal lands into individual allotments, Kiowa leader Lone Wolf cautioned, "They speak of making us landowners like themselves, but I have watched how they treat land. They exhaust one place and move to another. They dig holes and leave them. They cut all trees and plant none. Their way with land is a way of death." Among the Cherokee who had adopted many European practices, including private property, Principal Chief John Ross still warned, "Even when we use the land as they do, farming, raising livestock, building permanent homes, they still covet it. This shows that their hunger is not about how we use the land, but simply that we have it and they want it." Native leaders particularly warned about the spiritual consequences of land alienation. A Wintu woman named Kate Lucky memorably expressed this concern. "The white people never cared for land or deer or bear. When we kill meat, we eat it all. When we dig roots, we make little holes. We shake down acorns and pine nuts. We don't chop down the trees. We only use dead wood. But the white people plow up the ground, pull down the trees, kill everything. How can the spirit of the earth like the white man? Everywhere the white man has touched it, it is sore." Modern Native voices on historical warnings. Contemporary Indigenous scholars, activists, and tribal leaders continue to highlight the warnings of their ancestors, finding in them not just historical interest but ongoing relevance to modern challenges. These voices connect historical prophecies to current struggles for sovereignty, environmental protection, and cultural revitalization. Vine Deloria Jr., Standing Rock Sioux scholar and author, noted, "The warnings of our ancestors weren't just about their time, they were about patterns that would repeat. When Tecumseh warned about selling land, he wasn't just talking about acres and borders. He was warning about treating the sacred as a commodity, which we now see in the exploitation of natural resources and sacred sites." LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, Standing Rock Sioux historian and water protector, connected ancestral warnings to contemporary environmental movements. "Our grandmothers and grandfathers told us the time would come when we would have to stand for the water. During the Dakota Access Pipeline resistance, we were fulfilling prophecies made generations ago that we would need to defend the water against those who see it only as a resource to exploit." Winona LaDuke, an Anishinaabe economist and environmentalist, observes, "The warnings about breaking natural law weren't superstition, they were ecological knowledge. When our ancestors cautioned against taking too much, they understood sustainability centuries before it became a buzzword. Now science confirms what indigenous knowledge systems always knew about balanced relationships with ecosystems." Native language revitalization advocate Darrell Kipp Blackfeet connected historical warnings about cultural loss to contemporary healing. Our ancestors, who warned about losing our languages, weren't just concerned with words, but with entire worldviews contained in those words. Today, young people learning their native languages aren't just learning communication, they're reclaiming the perspectives that colonial education tried to eradicate. Indigenous legal scholar Walter Echo Hawke Pawnee notes how historical warnings about treaties relate to modern legal struggles. When leaders like Black Hawk warned about the manipulation of language in treaties, they were identifying problems in legal relationships that native nations still navigate today. Their insights about power imbalances in negotiation remain relevant in modern consultations about land use, resource extraction, and tribal sovereignty.